you, brother? How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. The weather's turning around, so looks like we're about to kick into a real spring right about now. I think we're gonna get 90s through the weekend, and I'm
Sweet.
stoked. Yeah. We got plenty of rain this year too, so Humboldt will be beautiful.
Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait for October harvest.
Me too. Good. So you
Sweet.
and I we chatted the other day, and it was just such an interesting conversation in our intro, and I would just kind of like to go bring that to the public because your background is so interesting, the work you're doing, and I know that many understand this stuff, but many don't. And so it would be great if we could just kind of dive into you and your background and what you're currently doing, and then we can go from there.
Sure. So my name is Usama Badad. I'm lead geneticist at Trilogy and Seeds. I'm a co-founder and chief science officer of Gromix. It's a multi-omics plant startup company here in the Midwest. I'm a geneticist who basically, by training, I have a bachelor in biology with a major in genetic conservation, a master degree in plant biotechnology with a an option in conservation as well. It's always my conservation background that pops up every time I have the chance to take an option. And then after my master's, I did a little bit of traveling in Africa through the U.S. National Library of Medicine and the National Center for Biotechnology and Information, Tanzania, Nigeria, Kenya, Malawi, South Africa. And on the way back home, started the PhD program on plant genomics. So just what is the next thing? What is the resource or what is the technology that we're gonna use to study and understand plants more? So it went from field work to lab work to computational biology work during my PhD. And I worked in genomics, functional genomics, and epigenomics. So we started by publishing an olive genome for the first time, and then all the work that been done, the epigenome that was published afterwards. Did a lot of work in soybean as well, in functional genomics and variation breeding or mutational breeding to create new variants. Worked in that industry for a while, and I had the idea, why not take all of the knowledge that is available today for other crops, such as soybean, corn, and cotton, and take that, bring it to the garden. Cannabis plant could use some of this technology that is available. And the cool thing is, instead of waiting 20, 30 years like the other crops for technology to come in, we have it available all at once. So translate that knowledge from soybean, olive, and other crops to cannabis to elevate the experience from growing, genetics, product formulation. If we have the right genetics for the right product, that's optimization, and that's where science becomes very important in the garden. And so the work that we do, I don't know how deep you want me to go down the rabbit hole, but
You can go down there a little bit because I think it's fascinating, and I think that for the listener, it would be very revealing to understand the science and technology behind modern plant breeding, and also how that impacts cannabis, because we're going to see this coming. So I think you can go down as deep as you want, because I just think it's a fascinating discussion.
Well, I want to share something about our breeding program. That is, this is not because I'm part of Trilogy and Seed, but if your breeding program is based on science, and the science today, from the few work that's been done on DNA and genomes and stuff like that, if we're thinking about cannabis as a source of cannabinoid, for example, just to have an example, there is different schools, different theories. Some of them believe that there is a particular set of this sequence that produces, for example, a high THC. You need to have a certain ATCG, a certain sequence, which we call a variant. there is another school or another theory that says the variant that you have does not matter. What matters is the number of copies of that variant that you have. To explain to people, in the genome of cannabis, you have varieties or cultivars or strains or landraces that will have one copy of the THCA synthase. You will have a cultivar with 4 or 5. So that school is saying the more copies you have, the more THC you have, just like driving a 4-cylinder or a 10-cylinder. The other, so these two, you have a variant and you have a number of the copies of that variant. So our breeding program tackles both of them. We're gonna look for rare variants and we're gonna create higher number of copies of gene. How would you do that? Is all the work that I personally did on soybean while I was at SIU doing my PhD. We do mutagenesis to create new things, or we try to shut down certain things to study them. That's what I told you, the science that comes from soybean to cannabis is we use mutagenesis to do functional genomics.
Can you explain that quickly, what mutagenesis is?
Absolutely. So mutagenesis is the random fact of creating new sequences, modifying DNA sequences. It depends what kind of modification. Some modification will be a simple switch of an A adenine with a T or a G or a C, a single base. You're creating a single nucleotide polymorphism, right? Some of this mutagenesis, what we will do, it will create a frame shift. It will move the piece of DNA by 3 or 4 bases. So it will block the expression of that protein. And this is done by different methodology. There is physical, chemical mutagenesis, radiations. There is all kind of agent for mutagenesis, which is basically just creating mutants, flipping A for T, C for G, hoping that we're going to create a new variant. Because the reason why we go for mutagenesis is because the way cannabis has been bred for the past 40, 50 years, it's a cool cut, throw the rest in the trash. So we narrowed the genetic diversity, and now we ended up with 3 cultivars in the same jar that look alike, smell alike. So how are we going to get new variants? So we have to induce that variation using mutagenesis. So this is the first part of our breeding program. The second part of our breeding program is the one that relies on the theory of copy numbers. The more copies of the gene, the more production. So how can we make a variety with a higher copy? We have to duplicate its genome. How can we duplicate its genome? There is ploidy manipulation methods that we use that will allow you to go from a diploid level to a tetraploid level using an anti-mitotic agent. So these two are the base. We stay away from crossing to breed. We have seed stock throughout the past few years, and that's the one that we use to, as I said earlier, if something does not exist in nature, you can keep crossing day and night. You're not going to create those new allele frequencies. So induce variation through mutagenesis. These two are these are not high level technology, but when they are powered by genotyping, by sequencing, then they become very powerful. I'll give you an example. Let's say I want to create 20,000 mutants, right? To grow 20,000 plants, to dry it, cure it, phenotype it with HPLC or GCMS, it's very costing and it's very time consuming. What if I can make the decision at seedling stage, which is 2-3 weeks after I put the seed in the soil, to decide which one I'm going to keep, which one I don't need to keep, so I don't have to grow them and phenotype them because it's going to be a waste of time and money. So we do genotyping. When you couple genotyping with mutagenesis, becomes what we call TILling by target sequencing. So what we do is we have our variety, we create mutations, we sequence everything, and we compare the profiles. We go to those genes and we see if my mother plant has an A in position X, and one of those varieties have a T, which means that that variant is different from the mother plant. So that one is interesting. I will take that one, grow it, flower it, to see what happened on the phenotype. And this is saving us a lot of money and allowing us to do 20,000, 30,000 plants phenohunts just from a small lab. Because everything could be still on racks, take a leaf, extract DNA, ship it to our partners. They do the sequencing, they send us the data, we analyze it. Now we know our mutants from the non-mutants. For the diploidy manipulation, the same thing. We treat bunch of seed, we grow them, we send them for flow cytometry analysis. Flow cytometry analysis comes back, tells you this one has a triploid or a tetraploid peak. You can keep those, you get rid of the rest. Now, I didn't have to grow all the way to the end. I didn't have to try and cure and face all the problems of cannabis growing. The other level of this is, when is cannabis going to be ready to be grown on a large acreage using seed and not worry about pollen or stability of genotypes? That's our other piece of the breeding program. So what is the most vigorous, most stable form of genetic material? It's an F1 hybrid. F1 hybrids they come from the crossing of two inbred lines, which means that these two could be land races. And that's what happened back in the 50s and 60s when we started crossing the Afghanis with the South American lines. Those were IBLs, naturally. They create those first hybrids. The problem is we bred those hybrids down and we messed it up. So imagine if I can go on 100 acres from seed, feminized seed, triploid seed, hybrid F1. That's like Santa Claus come down to the chimney and gives you that. That's like the Santa Claus list. Feminized, I'm not wasting my time and resources on male. Triploid, to avoid taking out pollen from surrounding cultivation. F1 hybrid is the vigor that allowed us to do what we did in corn, to go 40%, 60% up in biomass production. Imagine that for live rosin.
Could you cover the triploid angle for a sec so people understand with the unbalanced chromosome how it impacts pollination?
Absolutely. So a triploid plant is a crossing between a diploid and a tetraploid plant. So what happened is you have one gamete with N, which is a haploid, and the other gamete will be a diploid. When you stick those two together, you have 3 chromosomes in one cell. So what happened in the time of mitosis, or when you hit it with pollen and you want to have those cells to grow, 1 gives you 2, 2 gives you 4, whatever. You have 3 chromosomes, and it's not easy to split a chromosome between 2 cells. So there is no formation of that cell because we don't have the right number of chromosomes. And that what leads to not, people, they say it won't produce any seed. I would say, just from my experience, that it will produce a little bit of seed, not really a lot, but those seed will be non-viable, because the first reason why triploids were brought to the game in agriculture was not to avoid pollen. It was actually to avoid people using the seed from the harvest for the next year. It was a protection method for companies to protect themselves from seed thefts. And also it became a thing where a seedless watermelon is appealing because we don't have to fight the seed. And that's for cannabis, people want to use it for the wrong reason. Oh, it's not going to take pollen. It will take the pollen. Would it make seed? No. But taking the pollen will sit It will definitely sit. It's just to make a seed, that's what is impossible. So what we need to study is actually just the fact that the pollen is hitting the plant. What is the impact on cannabinoid production before we get to the seed? That's where science is very important. A lot of people, the hype is out there, blah, blah, blah. We have this, we have that. Please be honest in your science, because it could mislead people. And then we have a whole generation doing the wrong thing. So that's the triploids. And the cool thing about triploids is they have a vigor. They're like hybrids. If you compare them to the diploid or the tetraploid, if you want performance, when it comes to cannabinoid production, when it comes to dry weight matter for the inflorescence, it's day and night. You grab a tetraploid or a triploid flower and you take the diploid version of it, you have a statistical increase.
Is that from the increased gene frequency? Excuse me, is that from the increased gene frequency? What's the impact of the triploid on production? How does that relate?
Here is how I take it. You have a bigger plant, not in size, not in they're usually stout, short, but they're vigorous plants. They have bigger leaves, so they pour more light and they absorb more carbon, so they have a higher photosynthetic activity. That alone, even if we don't think that there is doubling the genes involved in all other compounds, just the fact that you're pulling more energy, it allows you to vessel that energy through the plants and take up the gene expression, even if we don't have a higher copy number, because there is a lot of epigenetic control of genes that I don't think the cannabis industry is there yet to understand the epigenetic phenomena of gene expression. But I think from my experience in epigenomic in olives, the gene expression is tightly linked to the environment, and environment can dictate one DNA methylation, for example, which is a molecule of carbon hooked to 3 molecules of hydrogen to move in the DNA and stop a whole gene from getting expressed just by binding into the binding site of the transcription factor that would allow that gene to get expressed. So until we get there, we need to understand just the physiology and the biology of the plant before we get to a deep molecular level. But to go back to the triploids, it's the fact that they have a weird odd number of chromosomes that gives them that vigor. And I'll be happy to share some manuscript with you to really like grasp the reality of those things and how we can use them for cannabis breeding. So these two are the main two, if you want, schools of breeding that we adopt. The new approach that we're doing at Trilogene is gene editing. If we can create a variant through mutagenesis, which is this is a funny thing that I always say, mutagenesis is nothing but a multiplex CRISPR randomly. Because what CRISPR does is it creates a mutation to knock out a gene, for example. That's exactly what we do with mutagenesis. CRISPR is very precise. You know the gene, you design a guided RNA that will bind to the gene in a certain spot, and it's going to go and do its job. So our first attempt to gene editing was a variety with 0% THC. Imagine if you could take crude oil across state. If you could import crude oil, like CBD oil, with no THC, because if there is any THC in there, there is remediation, you can use it in a certain product, blah, 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 blah. So we wanted to knock out the THC synthase so it stops working. 2 years of work, our patent just got approved for gene-edited plant. We are doing some lab testing, final lab testing before we go to outside trials. It's really hard to convince the USDA and the FDA to allow you to take a gene-edited plant outside of the lab. It's a nightmare. They have all of their skepticism that does not make a lot of sense, but I understand their fear from having something that is not stable. But the thing is, it's not a GMO. We did not introduce a foreign gene into it. We just, instead of having ABC, I went to the BC and I flipped them. That's it.
Gotcha.
Because if you flip them in that specific spot, it's a functioning part of the gene. It's going to lose its function. If it loses the function, it won't get expressed. I won't have THC. I have a THC null product. I can take it across state. I can ship it everywhere I want. And then started other projects. How can I say this? I call them the crazy project that it's the Santa Claus list. Is the powdery mildew knockouts, things like that we would love to see out in the market, because sometimes you have a very good variety, right? A good cultivar, and you dealt with this your entire life. When it's fire, it's everything you want, but it's got a susceptibility to a powdery mildew or something like that. So for powdery mildew, we know that there is a locus called MLO. If you have that gene, you are susceptible to powdery mildew. If you don't, or if you have a weird variant of that gene, you don't have powdery mildew. So the easiest thing is to go to that locus. It's been identified and mapped, and we know its address in the genome. Just go there and try to knock that one out, so there is no recognition between the plant and the pathogen. So we have no susceptibility without needing of crossing and introducing a foreign DNA in there. Try to clean it up with back crosses. All of that. It's very precise breeding, and you can screen for it when the plants are still in tissue culture. You take a sample, you sequence that specific gene, Sanger sequencing, $5 to Sanger that sequence, and you compare it to the wild type. If it's different, this one is different, let me hit it with powdery mildew, and you do an inoculation, and you watch your plant, the reaction. If that mutation you created, did it change the function or not? So this is where cannabis is going to be treated as a commodity, as an agricultural commodity. When it's going to be grown at a large scale for medicinal purposes, for extractions and for all of that, you're going to need genetics that you can rely on. The genetics that you can rely on, they're not made in a conventional way, or in a little like under the radar, under the table kind of. No, you need a lot of resources, and you need large acreage to test, validate, go through compliance, go through FDA, USDA. So this is important things that we're doing right now that the industry will be ready for, I would say, in the next 5 years, depending how we steer the regulation or upon federal regulation or not. Because the moment there is a federal framework for companies like Bayer, like Monsanto, well, it doesn't exist anymore, like BASF, Syngenta, they're going to come in. What do you think they will do when they come in? They're looking for genetics. The same story of the farmers of soybean and farmers of corn in Mexico. The same biopiracy, the same lawsuits, the same problem you're going to have, they're going to happen in here. So just to have something like related to the project, the Humboldt Grace Initiative, is how can we leverage technology to protect the farmers and allow them to monetize on those genetics when they can deal with a salesman from Syngenta. I have my variety, I have my test trials, I have my fingerprinting, I have my genome sequencing data, I'm protected. We need to open the conversation about protecting people. I know certain companies will take this as like, oh, this is niche. Oh, I'm going to go in and make some money because I'm going to test a bunch of things. But farmers needs to get to the point where spending $50 to $100 max on a genotyping for your variety, it's worth it. It's really worth it. Because I'll give you a simple case. A big company will come in, steal your genetics. They will grow it. You will grow it as well. They will come after you. That you stole. Exactly what happened in soybean farmers and corn farmers in Mexico. That's what Monsanto did to them. If that farmer had a certificate of analysis and a genotyping for his variety and said, I have this variety for so many years, I've been growing it, I've been maintaining it, and this is my proof, this is my ID of this variety, he could have went in that court and won the case and made millions of dollars, because those companies, they do have those millions of dollars. If you win in a case at the court, you're going to make money. Use that not only to protect yourself, but also as an asset when someone else's steals your thing, that you can use it to make money. That's your proof. But the problem is certain companies came in at a certain time and they collected a bunch of samples, the wrong kind of samples, because you never send seed. If you want to test, you see a piece of leaf, just to protect yourself as well. So people took a bunch of genotypes especially from Humboldt, and things went really weird. So now everybody's like, oh, I don't want to trust biotechnology companies anymore. I don't want to send my sample to anyone. It's just because you were misinformed and someone used that at a time where nobody knew and took a bunch of genetics out of Humboldt. But now we have the opportunity to do it right, to do it in a holistic manner and protect those people. So mainly these are the things that we do at Trilogene. F1 hybrids, IBIA program, mutagenesis program, ploidy manipulation program, and then a gene editing program.
What was really interesting when we spoke last week, Osama, was the fact that you were a native Moroccan, and that your interest was in really, like I would say, purifying the gene pool to get back to the gene source that was of desirability. Maybe we could go into that a little bit.
Absolutely. That's one of my favorite subjects to talk about. I did a lot of reading, a lot of anthropology, sociology, and I saw how cannabis moved from the Tibetan Plateau all the way to the Americas. It's a funny thing. Here again, there is two schools. One of them is saying that cannabis came from the Tibetan Plateau to the Turkey at the fork, and then went to Europe, and then to the Americas with the conquistador, looking for gold in the Americas. I say, I'm sorry, no, it did not go north at the fork. I say it came south at the fork. So when you're coming from China or the Tibetan Plateau towards the west, the only point that connects the two blocks, Africa and Europe and Asia, is Turkey. So when cannabis got to Turkey, coming from the extreme east, what did it transport with it? Tea and silk. Who was wearing silk and drinking tea in Europe back in the days? No one. You know who did? The pharaohs of Egypt, the kings of Morocco. North Africa did drink tea and did wear silk because it was always warm here. So what I think, cannabis came in from there, got to Turkey, came south at the fork, and then went to Europe when the Muslims, or what you guys know as the Moors, invaded Andalusia or Spain about 14 or 1500 years ago, and they introduced hemp pulp plants in southern Europe. So being in Morocco, if cannabis came from the extreme east, Morocco was the last resort of cannabis before going across Atlantic. And if you really think about when the first use of cannabis in the Americas, a lot of people think that Native Americans smoke cannabis a long time ago, thousands and hundreds of thousands of years ago. And I say it did not really happen. The first use of cannabis in the Americas were around the 1400s, 1500s. And that's exactly when the first movements of slavery came from Africa to the US. Some of those commodities that came with those people, cannabis, hemp seed. It all was called hemp seed back then. And then, of course, people went all over South America. The Christian missionaries went all over there, and they needed hemp. for robes and this and that, and then started all the domestication, all the selection, and all that. So being from Morocco, we've been producing cannabis for thousands of years, as far as the anthropology says, and we produce hashish, Moroccan hashish. The Beatles came to Morocco to smoke hashish. Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, the Eagles, the Led Zeppelins, and all of these people, they went to Morocco to smoke hashish and play music, because it was one of those countries that you can just go to. And the hippie movement was really big in Morocco, and we had beaches all over the place, and you could play music and smoke hashish. So the problem is, what we're looking at is at the end of 70s, early 80s, the demand on Moroccan hashish skyrocketed in Europe. But the Moroccan Bildia was not a very vigorous plant that would produce a lot of biomass to produce more hash. So those brokers brought Dutch hybrids that were like an Afghani crossed to a Moroccan Bildia, a red Lebanese to a Mexican sativa, whatever, all those hybrids, the Amnesia, the Critica, and all of these things started coming to Morocco. And what happened is, pollen everywhere. We lost that genetic patrimony, that Moroccan Bildia. We lost it because now there is no clean Bildia unless you smuggled some seed in the early 70s. Luckily, we have some friends that worked with Neville that had like varieties like Moroccan Bildia, like Mount Sinai from Egypt, like all of these weird old ancient genotypes that we recovered some of them, and we started a conservation program in Ketama, in the Rif, the heart of the Rif, in the Sanhaja tribes. We are about 1,800 meters above sea level. It looks like a Chinese plateau for rice. That's how we grow cannabis up there. And we've been able to recover. We've been able to do some sequencing and compare this and that. And we're working on it. We want to bring the old version of the Bildia back to produce some pretty good medicine, and also put it in breeding programs. If we can go back and recreate those old genetics, we can create the first hybrids that started this entire industry. And I have a list of just genetics from all over the place that, put in the right sequence in the right breeding project, can bring some new variants to the industry. So conservation is key. And I'm not talking only about Moroccan Bildia. I'm talking about the Mazar Sharif and all the old Afghanis varieties and land races. I'm talking about Congo Red. I'm talking about the Malawi Golds. I'm talking about all the Ortegas and all the stuff that started all of this. If we can bring them back and cross them, and instead of taking one winning cut, let's explore the genetic diversity in that. That's a recombinant inbred line that you can find, at least if you do a huge run of two recombinant inbred lines from two different parts of the plant, and you make that recombinant inbred line population, you can find a lot of medicine in there. Because now breeding is not only about how high that plant gonna test at, or how potent that plant gonna test. We're looking for flavonoid, we're looking for terpenoid, we're looking for different kind of terpenoids. We're looking for minor cannabinoids that are not psychoactive, for example, but with medicinal properties. And what we should do is, there is the Nagoya Protocol. The Nagoya Protocol, that's part of the biodiversity that was signed, is telling you we need a equitable and a fair sharing of these genetics around the world. And if we can do a seed bank, a cannabis seed bank, where everybody can contribute to it, doesn't belong to anyone, it's not a centralized thing, and we can use crypto or whatever to manage it, and anyone who is facing a problem in their breeding program can go there and grab some and do whatever they need to do and have a little bit of royalties that go back to that seed bank to maintain it, to clean accessions, things like that. That will be very helpful to create better medicine for humankind.
Yeah, the Nagoya Protocol was interesting because it's difficult to create it in some instances because we have issues with the countries, so the governments don't line up, so it doesn't create the fluidity needed. But I love the idea behind it where it was an ongoing benefit to the farmers of origin. So it wasn't just the genetic acquisition, you get paid for your genes once, but you have an ability to be in benefit for perpetuity, which then allows there to be the cultural stability needed to maintain this diverse bank. And so then I was introduced to the Nagoya Protocol because we were talking about, benefits of working with farmers in other countries and how do we create the relationship needed so that what you don't have is usury. So the individuals that have this heritage of holding genes for millennia, how do they not just sell what they have and then receive a stipend and that's it, but how does it continue? And I love the idea of the gene bank because you're able to now work collaboratively, but through some form of documentation. And that's why I like crypto as well, because when we touch the asset, the individual gets paid. Oh, you're on mute.
So the thing that we're trying to start back home, I work with a senator gentleman called Adbib, Abdul Latif. Mr. Adbib is, if you want, the Che Guevara of indigenous people in that northern part of Morocco. He was voted by people not only in Morocco, but from a lot of different countries through a UN project to be their voice, to be able to grow poppy, coca, and cannabis. And he spoke in the United Nations so many times. He's well known around the planet. And I'm working with him on a small vertical integration in the most remote part of Morocco. He doesn't want to move out of there. He doesn't want to go down. He doesn't want to come out of the hill. He doesn't want to come out of the mountains and go down to the valley. He wants to stay up there. And anybody wants to work with me, you need to come to me. And I understand the reason why. There is a void between the valley and the mountain when it comes to resources, highway, all of that. If we bring businesses to that part of the country, the logistics needs to follow. So we're creating an equitable development for that region, not only cannabis, but for everything else. Hospitals, schools, economy. And that area is gorgeous. It's cedar trees, massive cedar trees, Mediterranean influence. You have 4 seasons. It snows, it gets hot. You go down the valley, you are on that side of the Mediterranean, that's the beach. It's kind of like the Emerald Triangle, but it's like a 10,000-year-old Emerald Triangle.
That's what you had explained, that the Emerald Triangle, because I researched it, the Emerald Triangle was a name given to us from the Drug Enforcement Agency in reference to the original Emerald Triangle.
Yeah, so there is the region of Katama, which is like the high plateaus in the mountains, and then you have Taunat and Shawan, and those are a little lower. It's exactly like you're going to compare Humboldt with Mendocino. They start at the valley and then up. Instead of hills, we have mountains.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420.
Are you looking to get your medical cannabis grow license? Limestone City Hydroponics can help patients through the process of obtaining their license to grow medical cannabis. What's that? You don't have a doctor. If you meet the medical criteria, Limestone City Hydroponics has a nurse practitioner who can assess and provide medical cannabis prescriptions. What are you waiting for? Contact Limestone City Hydroponics at limestonecityhydroponics.ca or call them at 613-548-0420.
What do you find at paceradio.net? People advocating cannabis education.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Cannabis edibles are an effective way to manage pain and other ailments, especially when you deal with your trusted partner, Legacy 420, in Tyendinaga Mohawk territory. You see, we lab test every product on site to ensure proper dosage every time, which is critical when consuming cannabis edibles. All Legacy 420 edibles are made by our classically trained baker and chocolatier, and we also have super tasty vegan options.
Our baker has been in the industry for 25 years. She's also a chocolatier. Everything from savory to sweet, your chocolate bars, brownies, butter tarts, you name it, we make it.
Talk to our knowledgeable Cannatex about our incredible variety available. Give your trusted partners a call. Legacy 420 out on your road.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The cool thing about Morocco is you can only grow. This is part of the legalization project. It was not just let's legalize cannabis. It was cannabis in Morocco was legalized because of the people of the north, the Rif. That's the only culture they had. And they couldn't grow potatoes or anything else. And they had royal decree from the old kings to grow cannabis. Then the legalization was not for Morocco, it was for that part. So now you can only grow in those three, if you say counties or municipalities. And to be able to grow cannabis, you need to be from the region. You need to be a Moroccan resident. So let's give those people first the right to benefit from the industry, because today there is like 60,000 warrants on people up there. So the people that have been impacted by the war on drugs needs to benefit first. Mm-hmm. That's why Morocco did all these set of laws. You cannot just grow anywhere in Morocco. You got to be growing in there. And to have a license, you have to have a partner, a farmer from the region. So they tightened the thing so they can develop the region. That's the first phase. And I'm pretty sure there will be a second and a third phase where you can grow cannabis in the entire country. But for now, the focus is on the Rif and those people to allow them to create an equitable, all the things that all governments want to hear, development, blah, 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 drag capital from Europe, America, Middle East, all of those things. But I'm happy that we made this decision to block the growing area right out there and allow. And if you want to do anything related to the cannabis operations, it needs to be up there. So imagine if we did the same thing in California, and instead of dragging people and suffocating them to get out of the hill, what if we brought them roads and we said, okay, California, we're just gonna do Mendocino, Humboldt, and Trinity. That's it. It would have been a different outcome.
That was the dream. It's just that what we found was that the political groups in Salinas and Monterey and Carpinteria and Santa Barbara were more powerful than our political groups.
And I understand. And the thing is, the way governments, local government, state government works in the U.S. is a little tough. Back home, we have a king. And when you have a dahir that comes out of the royal palace, it's really hard to mess around.
Is a dahir like a decree? Is that what that would imply?
That's what a dahir means. Yeah, it's a royal decree, comes out of the palace, and it gets published in Morocco. We have the Le Bulletin National. If there is any important thing or law, anything that's been passed, it needs to be published in the Bulletin National so people can know. In the US, they pass a lot of bills underneath our noses. We don't know anything because it don't get published unless you're listening to NPR. But I think Morocco is in a really good spot just because there is a tradition behind that is thousands of years old. There is a geostrategic spot of Morocco right there between Europe, Asia, the US. Anybody wants to come to Africa, Morocco is a getaway. Commerce, international commerce is pretty good for Morocco. Moroccan hash has been already sold, so we don't need to do marketing. We don't need to do a lot of things. We just need to make it GMP. So it's going through channels for medicinal purposes. Like Germany won't buy your hashish. It needs to be EU, GMP, CGMP certified. The cool thing is the way we make hashish, it's very easy and simple that we can just put machines together, just presses and shakers, and it's easy, and that allows us to be in that GMP spectrum. We can, export to Germany. Do you imagine if I sell you a little tablet thing, but instead of pills, there is single doses of hash like this? Oh, this is my single dose of hash for today, or for, oh God, it smells so amazing. Anyway.
Is that the Bedilla?
That's Bildia, yes, sir. I had the people of Valoya lighting. They hooked me up with some new lights. That's why the lab is all messed up. I got rid of the old ones. We put some new ones with like UV, and they're pretty cool. So I broke a little piece of that Bildia and I treated it to a joint. So it was right before the meeting. So yeah, this GMP instead of pills goes 30. And you can use one every day. Break it, smoke it into a joint. People know how to smoke Moroccan hashish. Anyone in Europe you go right now, a smoker, you tell them Moroccan joint, they know how to roll it. They know it requires a little bit of tobacco, the bottom tip of the cigarettes as a filter, and a rolling paper. And it looks like a cigarette, and it protects you when you smoke. Instead of just a filter with nothing, you have actually the cigarette filter that stops some of the heat, some of the, Anyway, that's a different process, but that's the goal, is to export a beautiful medicine terroir out of that area.
It's fascinating because it's the foundation of the behavior and the process to be able to legitimatize these local farmers and the product that's been held in their hands for millennia. And I think that, for us in Humboldt County and a lot of these other smaller production regions within the U.S., it allows there to be a format to start to understand a way forward. And what I've noticed from the work I've done globally is that all small farmers are fundamentally the same. They have similar desires of a better life. They want to do it in a sustainable agricultural manner. And without doubt, most of them are getting run over as if they were standing in the middle of the freeway. Yeah. And so the ability to start to create these discussions and these conversations is critical. And I think that, that was from Lili's perspective, the idea of how do we preserve and maintain the legacy of the region through the genetics, because that's really what developed our area, was that people had sourced genes from around the world. They brought these inbred lines together. They collided them. The genes that were present in that 60s, 70s, going into early 80s were incredible, but the drug war radically changed everything because it started to take away your ability to cultivate naturally. So you started to have to force production to go into unnatural methods. And we started to slowly bottleneck the genes. We started to steer towards some very specific routes. The US started to slowly develop an incredible pharmaceutical opiate addiction that drove the profiles into a very specific range. And we started to lose the diversity. And the idea now is that so much of the cannabis is, to me, it's homogenous. It doesn't matter what the name is or who's talking, it's really maybe 6 or 7 different lines that are forming everything. And you never really have an ability to find something that takes you where you want to go on a consistent level, because it's very difficult to find it in source and production.
We were talking about it last time. We do a lot of work with SC Labs, and they were just looking at the profiles of the flower coming in, and they're like, all of these batches are the same. 80 to 85% of all of these batches, desserts, they're all high and heavy in myrcene and beta-caryophyllene. Even sometimes when the bud, the color looks different, but the biochemistry is the same. And I tell people, the colors that you see, that's epigenetic control, unless for the purple ones, if you have an extreme expression of anthocyanin synthases, or the ones that degrades chlorophyll. That's why you get those colors. But that dark purple, I don't think that's due to a gene. Magenta purple, like this light kind of pinkish purple right here, that could be due to a gene, because the leaves don't get dark. Only the callus gets dark.
Gotcha.
And when I like this purple magenta. It's not really dark. When you see those dark purple ones, that's usually a high degradation of chlorophyll into anthocyanin that gives those colors. But until now, I didn't see someone who actually did a gene expression on those genes and said, my flower is purple because I have a high gene expression of those genes. You can do a cold treatment at the end of the flower cycle, turn that flower dark. That's not magic. But to grow in optimum conditions and have a purple flower like that, not really. So this entire industry is weird. This is like, I sit here and I just go through social media and I see what people are doing, what people are posting, go to LinkedIn, Instagram. It's just like everybody is doing his own thing, not worried about anything else going around. And I don't think it's the right approach. I think if you are a breeder, you should breed being conscious of what's going on around you, instead of I'll tell you an example. This year, everybody is saying, well, we're going to go away from like candy and desserts. We're going to go toward garlic flavors, because every year certain people get together and we're going to steer the market. This year is garlic or whatever. But what about, I don't care about that garlic, let's say, or fruit, or that. What about medicine? How about someone who is breeding for processability, for example? Not all flour is smokable. Certain of flowers, they're only for that good dumpers. They could be made for rosin, but you don't have a lot of people breeding for these purposes. People are breeding for look and high THC, right? But there's a lot in between those things that we can breed for to optimize. But here again, the industry, even at this point, is still at an infant stage. We're still relying on elite clones that are circulating a lot of disease with them from place to another. We are still relying on we're not testing the way we should. We're closing the eye on a lot of things that we should not close the eye to. We are everybody is cutting corners because everybody wants to go quick to market and make a buck. Everybody wants a 7-8 week finisher because they have certain processes that one. Bottom line, if you're gonna grow cannabis at a large scale, it needs to come out your indoor facilities and greenhouses. Like if anything that could be said about this industry, because the illegal market pushed cannabis into indoor. That's we can agree on. If it was not for law enforcement and people trying to hide their plants, we will never have an indoor industry.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that we went inside, we create a lot of susceptibility on a lot of plants. You can't take something in a confined environment the same again and again and expect it to thrive. Let's do things right. If we're gonna use this crop, and I consider cannabis a crop because a lot of medicines are crops. Black seeds, for example, like black cumin, is a medicinal crop. Plant is a crop. If we start treating it as a crop and taking it outside, working on the plant, forget about millions of dollars in indoor facilities of lights and humidifier and dehumidifiers and this and that. Take all of that money and put it into the genetic work on the plant itself. Make resilient phenotypes that could grow in a very humid area, very arid area, breed for microclimates, breed for latitudes. I'll give you an example. We have genetics that are they just finished in New Zealand. Right? If you're breeding in North America on a certain latitude, how do you expect your genetics to work in Argentina, in Australia, in New Zealand? How do you expect something that's been bred in Colorado to grow in Thailand, where there is humidity, or to grow in Southern Illinois, where I live?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody cares about this. I just want to throw the seed, and then we'll see how they will do. No. When we're doing home grow, yeah, you can see how it will work. But we are talking about a commodity, agricultural commodity, agriculture. I want government contracts. That's where we need to start thinking. But government contracts needs 40 billion seeds. Who is today in the US or in the world producing 40 billion viable seed? No one.
No one. That was what was so interesting. Conversation with the triploids was that because it had such a higher efficiency in energy capture, that it made me realize that it's that ability to be able to steer into more northern latitudes and do less than optimal growing situations, so that you're able to really have more regional cannabis, because the plant has the ability to function with the conditions and produce still exquisite flower, or whatever with the sources that we want.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. Companies, they try to rush to market. Like in the company, we're always having this conversation. Like, guys, we need to be aware of what's going on in the market, but we don't have to go at a certain pace, because at a certain point, you are cutting corners. When a process that needs a certain amount of time, a certain amount of resources, you can only accelerate it if you have more resources. But when you try to get to market just because X, Y, and Z is going to market with maybe the same thing, you can make mistakes. Triploids are something that is very sensitive in the making. Some people, they have a polyploid,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they're like, oh, we have this tetraploid. A polyploid and a tetraploid is two different things. In a polyploid, you can have different ploidy levels. You can have one stem that is tetraploid, but the rest are diploid. That's a polyploid. Now, the problem when you are making seed, you are making two types of seed. You're making.
I got you. It's unstable within the entire plant, and so portions of it have different gene frequency than others, which creates no stability in the seed population. Absolutely.
And imagine that a company is throwing this out in the market. Someone is getting it, thinking that they have true to type triploids. They grow it, it gets seeded. Now we lost that trust of the farmer in that technology because of a bad apple. When I say do your crossings, take leaf sample, do flow cytometry analysis, look at your peaks. Now, if you see a triploid peak, that peak is not going anywhere. That's not a polyploid. And what we do is we don't only sample one. You take 1, 2, 3 samples from different part of the plants just to avoid having a polyploid.
Yes, just so that it's so that you're aware that the genes that you've captured from the plant reflect the entire plant, not just the potential for a branch that had a different gene sequence.
But the problem is, people are using their brand presence and their community that is buying their gears. And if they feel threatened by a company saying that we're working on this and this, and we post everything that we do, like we try to keep people engaged and part of the process. So when you're like done, I'm like, I have these seeds ready. People actually follow during that process. They're familiar with that plant. But just because you're threatened, you start dropping things and like, oh, we have this and that. And then when you go by, they will tell you coming soon. That's the problem. That cannabis companies, they compete, but they don't compete in the work. They compete in the hype.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the subculture. That's how it works. You got to create the hype with the marketing and everything and hype people up. So when your product is finally ready and it comes to market, you have people already like ready to accept it. But I think sometimes it's false hope when sometimes you don't dial your process yet and you're promising these things. People that are loyal to your brand, they want to wait until you drop that. And you can see this with a lot of brands that see it drop within 25, 30 minutes, everything is gone because you build a community around the brand. And it doesn't matter if that's right or wrong, or if it's actually a good thing or not. Your community going to still take it because of that establishment of sense of community that you build with them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, tell me these are testers, I will understand. Say when that's it, I'm like, guys, we try this scientific concept for the first time. These are testers. We would love for our community to try them, give us a feedback. That it's understandable. Something that is coming out of R&D the first time. I would love my community to try it first, give me the right feedback, and then I can go with it on a larger scale. But it's just, and it's frustrating, for certain people that are really doing the work, like really, really hardworking and doing the science and putting money behind all of this. It's really frustrating when you have someone just being a clown and doing the hype on Instagram or whatever, and they're dragging business towards whatever. It pisses you off, but stay focused, work on the things that we work on, believe in the science, see it unfold. That's how we work, and we hope that soon we establish what cannabis genetics should be. Like we are still, because if you tell me that I have a breeder's cut, that's not breeding for me. If you take one and B and you cross it because you got a gear from here and a gear from there, and you hunted that, you call that a breeding process. That is not a breeding process. That is a selection process. Different. Take a cool cut and then do an S1 and sell it to people. You know what an S1 is? An S1 is a population in segregation. If you can sell that whole batch to one person and they grow it, it's going to be like crazy because it's an S1 coming of a hybrid of a hybrid of a hybrid of a hybrid through selection. It's not something that it's fixed or it's stable or homozygous. No, it's a cross, which is 50% from this, 50% from this. They're close to, even the parents are close to each other, but it's still creating a segregation population. People are selling concept, like I've heard people selling F2s. Why would you buy F2s? An F2 came from a true F1 hybrid that is 100% heterozygous that was crossed to itself. So the F2 gonna be 25% like the grandpa, 25% like the grandma, and 50% like the hybrid. This is a Mendelian segregation. So you just lost 50% of your yield. And people sold F2 hybrids. I'm like,
oh, it's popular. No, you lose the heterosis from that first F1, but the issue so much is that there really is so few inbred lines that have actually been stabilized and worked into a true inbred line that almost everything that's used in cannabis in North America is polyhybrids woven upon polyhybrid. So when you break it apart, it's just a cornucopia. And I think that the entire cultivation community has become comfortable with the fact that when you're buying a population, what you're doing is you're buying enough to look through to find a plant that works for your situation versus the ability to just, like with any other crop, buy seed that is within a standard range of deviation. So expectations are met, timing is met, resistance is met, and it just simplifies the process.
Absolutely. And that's where cannabis should go, because it's first is going to bring it outside of the indoor facilities first. And I cannot wait. I cannot wait, because cannabis is a sustainable crop. We want cannabis for carbon sequestration, for the love of God. The highest carbon sequestration ability in the planet. Well, imagine if instead of growing in these indoor facilities and wasting a lot of lights, a lot of gas, a lot of power, a lot of that, we are growing that crop outside, and it's helping us fix all that carbon dioxide. Now, cannabis is beyond a medicine, is a phytoremediator for the planet, is a holistic plant. It's cleaning your soil. Don't get me started on this, because we can talk for hours. I am against indoor cultivation. I do not like indoor cultivation. I think that it's polluting, and it's taking a lot of resources that could be invested into those workers. You know, the people that are trimming and doing all of that got paid $12 an hour, while you are paying a power electric bill for millions of dollars to corporations. Cannabis belongs outside. Allow the plant to grow, to give the medicine. Sun grown has not only one cannabinoid. Take any homegrown and do a test. You will have a little bit of THCV, a little bit of CBDV, some of this, some of that, some of this. In indoor, it's steered toward one or two things. Someone who is growing on cocoa or on whatever that's watering 2-3 times a day with all those runoffs, what are you doing? But you know why? Because genetics are weak, and they need to be babysit, and they need to be from clone, because they're not ready. That's why we have that industry. Because they think if they control the environment, no bugs, no disease pressure, no fluctuations, we're going to make those plants perform. And they do, but at what price?
Truth. It's a sacrifice.
I've seen 16, 18 footers in Humboldt. I'm like, this is how you should grow cannabis. Every garden has 10 plants. That's all you need. Imagine growing a plant that could give you 15, 20 pounds. That's what people are pulling out of an entire 20, 30 lights rooms. I don't know. It's take cannabis out of those growths. I know people will like tell me to shut up because I'm tapping into their businesses, but take cannabis out of there. Take it out. Put it on the rotation, for the love of God. You know, the cool thing about cannabis, it pulls stuff from the soil, heavy metals and all of that. Just grow it there. And take all that biomass and turn it into fiber for clothes like this shirt, or hempcrete. You have homeless people all over California and Oregon. Do small housing with hemp fiber. All the trash that you get from those facilities needs to be taken to processing facility, decorticated, and turned into hempcrete. Cannabis waste should be used. Cannabis is that only plant that from top to bottom needs to be used. You don't throw the leaves, juice them. But you can't juice
Truth.
something that was grown inside with spraying every day. No, you can't. But that's why we rely on community like Humboldt, like Tama, like Kandahar, like Kabul, like the little regions in the northern part of Lebanon, to conserve that knowledge, the how-to, the genetics, the medicine, the spirituality. It's, I don't know, Crisco or Curaleaf or whatever these people, they're not going to provide any of that or protect any of it. So we're going to rely on small communities with the Rastafari movement in Jamaica and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Those
Which
are
was
the people
interesting.
that...
Yeah, the Jamaica, I was just in Jamaica, and it was incredible about how in order to have a license in Jamaica, you have to have the blessing from the Rastafarian community, and it creates a check and balance system so that what you have is non-exploitative, non-abusive production.
Absolutely, and this is how it should be.
Yeah, it has to be, there has to be parity. And I think that's the issue that is occurring with us here, is that what you had was communities that developed under cannabis cultivation, but under prohibition. But nonetheless, it developed 50, 60 years of community and behavior and land stewardship. And with the changes in the markets and how they got controlled, it decimated these regions. And it comes down to now, how does one steward the land if there's no money to steward? How do you preserve these regions? And then it sets to me a tone of another wave of colonialism to come through and do exploitative work, take the natural resources, export the profits. And so what you're doing is you're just systematically destroying small communities to centralize the monies in other locations. And at the end of the day, it's just a very short-sighted model of the reality of life, that there has to be sustainability for all organisms, not just the three at the top that figured out how to manipulate the system.
You touched on a very sensitive subject, and I told them, I'm going to say this, and I hope I don't offend anybody. It's not my intention, and I don't believe in race, and I don't believe in any of that shit. White man came to Africa a while ago to take gold, to take water, to take oil, diamonds, cobalt, all precious stuff. Now they're coming back for our dirt. Now, Portugal, Spain, Israel, Switzerland, if they want to produce cannabis, where do you think they're going to produce it? In Israel? In Spain? In Portugal? In Switzerland or Germany? It's going to be produced in Tanzania, and Malawi, and Kenya, and Nigeria, and Botswana, and Morocco, because it's cheap and because they can grow large acreage, because they can have 300 or 400 workers working for $1 a day. That's the new wave and era of colonialism coming. This is the new King Leopold of Belgium coming back to kill 40 million Africans again. But this time they're going to kill them with a lot of, not with bullets, with other chemicals that needs to be used to produce this or produce that, and all the things. And I felt it personally. Personally, I've been harassed by companies from around the world. Work with us. We want to do this and want to do that and want to do this and want to do that. But they need you because you're Moroccan. Because they can't get into business unless they have a Moroccan guy. What Moroccan dude you're going to meet? Someone who is in the industry here, who knows a thing or two, that could take you and allow you to have a foot in that country. I've seen this. I've been approached by hundreds from left and right, and it doesn't happen like that. You know, if you want to work in that country, and I'm not only saying about Morocco, if you want to work in Jamaica or Colombia or Mexico or Lebanon or Palestine or Afghanistan, go with the mind of, I'm going to make $2. I'm going to keep $1.50. I'm going to give them $0.50. From the $1.50 that I made, I'm going to take $0.50. I'm going to invest it in road, in water supply, in energy, or anything, or a hospital, or a little school for those kids. You know that $0.50 that you invested, the gratitude the love and respect, the brotherhood that you will get from those people will shield you against anything in the world. But nobody is willing to split with the people. They want to come in, take the big cash, and leave little crumbs just to satisfy them. Those people are tired of just being satisfied. They want the piece of bread with the little cheese on it, with the little jam on it. They want the little charcuterie board. They don't want just bread. They spend thousands of years just eating bread, and people are making millions of dollars out of their work. Now it's time to have an honest conversation, either you want it or not. If you want to make money, the tide needs to lift their boats before they get to yours, or it's not happening. And this is the feeling that I get from my people. They told me, look, anybody who is reaching out to you to work with us, they're not going to be just the growers. We want to be involved in every part of the supply chain. This is how you can build community in Garberville instead of looking like a crackhead motel. Create value transformation within the community. Don't just ship genetics. No. Bring business there. Transform those genetics. Develop products there. And that's what those farmers want in the reef. They said, we're not going to just grow. Not a contract. We're not growing for you just to buy biomass from us. No. We want to be involved. We want a piece of that last product that comes out of the port that is high value dollar. We want a piece of that. And
that's the only fair exchange.
It is fair. It is fair. Cannabis, there is millions of dollars to be made, even if you take 0.1% of the global shares. You are still making tens of millions of dollars. For a small community like mine in the reef, that's what we want. I want hospitals. I want schools. I want roads. I want the kids not to have to go 200 miles away from their families to live with a cousin to be able to go to school, or someone to have to travel to the family to be able to be in a hospital. Like, this is beyond just cannabis, guys. This is a gift from God to rebuild those communities. We're going to get to a time where cannabis is going to feed us alone, going to give us food. It's going to give us material to build. It's going to give us housing. It's going to give us clothing alone. We're not going to be able to grow cotton or jute or any of these fibers because they need a lot of water, because they require roundups, because they require a lot of processing. I love hemp, man. I wear it all the time instead of linen, because linen cannot go in a dryer and regular washer. Hemp fiber doesn't shrink. So like, and when I talk about cannabis, I don't only talk about cannabinoids. I talk type 1 to type 5. CBD cultivar, THC cultivar, mixed ratios cultivar. This is something that nobody talks about. Minor cannabinoid cultivars, and then grain and fiber cultivars. Because that also needs to be grown in the US. People are like, industrial hemp should be all over the US. It was here before the prohibition in the 30s.
Yes.
It was here. When the US needed it again in the war, they passed a law just to put it back into the fields because we needed ropes and stuff. And then criminalize it again. No, it's like, what are we waiting for? Soybean and cotton and corn, they need something to clean up their messes. The Roundup Ready, the full input of nitrogen and organic matter and stuff. Let carbon sequestration heal your soils. Like, these conversations, they gave me heated because, as I said, the game here is way bigger than just cannabinoid or just medicine or getting high, or it's the livelihood of millions and millions of people. And I appreciate you taking the time today to tap into this, because we get all kind of interviews and talking about cool stuff, but nobody is talking about the real deal, the real things that are making communities and hurting communities. And the lucky thing that we are on the bottom of that in the genetic world. That's what we do. And the right genetics can bring up or down the market. So for more love, more money, more resources into the plant, into understanding its biology, its physiology, its molecular biology, mechanisms of that. It will serve us. Believe me, I've seen this firsthand in soybean and corn and how science elevated everything, but and then took a wrong path. Hopefully, it does not happen in cannabis. But we need some science into the plant before we go do anything else.
Certainly. No, thank you so much for taking the time, because the topic has to be discussed, and you need to. It's so many facets to this gem that if we don't see all of them, we don't really understand how it shines. And so, thank you so much, Osama. It was a fantastic conversation.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own, and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
When you have a pain that's reached its peak, Legacy for 20, it's so unique. If organic cannabis is what you seek, here's your trusted partner 7 days a week. Suppository salves, vapes and drops, topicals, edibles, infused pop. Just when life seems like it ain't easy, at Legacy 420, enjoy a pop freezy. Lab tested products, make them the GOAT. Legacy 420 out on your road. Legacy 420 in Tyendinaga Mohawk territory. Indigenous organic cannabis at its finest.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420.